Dear learners, today we will be discussing about impact assessment methodologies, the checklist and matrices method. It is part of the course Environmental Impact Assessment for Environmental Health. And this session will be discussing on various aspects of impact assessment methodologies, particularly the checklist, the matrices, the you have different type of matrices as well, and we will be discussing every aspect of it in this session. To start with, we all know the environmental impact assessment, it is a basic tool to understand what kind of impact any project, any environmental project it can have on the environment. Let us define the word environmental impact assessment. The environmental impact assessment, it is defined as the whole lot of process whereby the information about the environmental effects of a project is collected, assessed and taken into account in reaching a decision on whether the project should go ahead or not. In other words, whether to have the project implemented or not. This is basically the environmental impact assessment, and in other words, it is a kind of an assessment of the impacts of any planned activity on the environment. Okay. So, in this case the environmental impact assessment considers different alternatives, project alternatives, options and also mitigation measures. In nutshell, if you see, this environmental impact assessment provides in end of the assessment, it provides a document, a well comprehensive document called environmental statement. So, in this process, if you see, a lot of things are there in the framework. If you look at it, the environmental impact assessment, a lot of framework. In that particular framework, you will be seeing the basic thing is the activities, certain basic activities are there, wherein we will be discussing about the description of the affected environment and about the project proposals and what are the alternatives, project alternatives, and the third one is the impact prediction and assessment. Next important aspect of the particular framework, if you see environmental impact assessment framework, is the preferred action, and that you need to select the preferred action from a suite of alternative plans, and the last one is the documentation. So, if you see the most important aspect in fact in the environmental impact assessment strategies are impact identification. So, when you look at the impact identification, basically what we look at the impact identification is that we will be taking into account the project characteristics and also the baseline environmental characteristics also. It in fact it brings together both of these simultaneously with the aim of ensuring that all potentially significant environmental impacts, whether it is an adverse one or a favorable one, it will be identified and thereafter will be taken into account in the environmental impact assessment process. Okay. So, now what are the basic aim of an impact identification methods? What are the basic aim? So, if you look at it, this the process itself, environmental impact assessment process itself, it is a kind of an interdisciplinary one, and wherein the natural scientist, the social scientist, the project developers, the decision makers and everyone will be part and parcel of the particular program, the environmental impact assessment. It is a kind of a process, and in that process if you see, there are certain aims of identification method is there. What are those aims, the goals of the identification method? The first and foremost important thing is these methods and the exercise should comply with the regulations, the law of the land. The second important aim is to provide a comprehensive coverage of a full range of impacts. The impacts can be a short term one or a long term one, and it also includes the social impacts, economic impacts and physical impacts. So, and as I already told you that the impacts can be a negative and also positive one as well. So, every aspect of impacts it will be included. That will be very much we need to get into the information about the impacts through this impact assessment methodologies. We have a lot of methods are there, and as far as the impacts are concerned, certain impacts can be reversible one and certain are irreversible one. So, we need to take care of the irreversible impacts as well. And the next objective of this impact assessment methodology is to identify the secondary impacts, secondary indirect impacts, and also the cumulative impact also has to be taken into account along with the direct impacts. So in a way, this environmental impact assessment methodologies take into account every aspect of the impacts. Every aspect of the impacts has been covered in this particular what you call the methodologies. Next one is we need to look at the possible alternatives also, because whenever we go for any project proposal, we need to look at the project alternatives, because alternative options are very, very important, because these alternative options also has to be analyzed from the perspective of the impacts, from the perspective of the impacts in terms of social, economic and biophysical. That impact also has to be taken into account, and more importantly that how much imprint it can cause on the environment, that has to be taken into account. So in that sense, this objective of this impact assessment methodology is to have a comparison of all the possible alternative strategies also. And the next one is these methods, whatever we are talking about, it should be easy. It should be easy, meaning to say that it should be economical in use, and for that also very importantly it should be reproducible. It is a most important thing, because along with the simplicity, it should be more of reproducibility, and definitely it has to be maintained the integrity aspect as well. Integrity means, I mean to say that these methods, whatever we are talking about, it should be unbiased in nature, and it should give a consistent results. That is the meaning of reproducibility. And to definitely these all the things will be summarized in the environmental impact statements. So now, looking at the methods, we have a series of methods, but let us see one by one. But basically, if you see the crux of the methods, these methods, what is the purpose of these methods? The methods are basically to identify, describe and assess the impacts of the proposals, the project actions, project proposals. It has to be identified, and once it has been identified, it has to be described properly, and definitely we will be looking at the impacts assessment also. So this is the basic purpose of these methods. And finally, it has to be definitely communicated to whom? To the decision makers and the common public. And with this background, let us see the methods that are available as part of the impact assessment methodologies. The first and foremost method is the checklist, the second is the matrices, the networks, and there are a series of quantitative methods as well. And very important thing, the GIS based method is that is overlays, and next method is the project appraisal for development control. It's called PADC. It's a very new one, but nevertheless it is very important thing. And the last one is the models. So these are all the methods available in front of us to use to identify the impacts. But very important point, you must understand that looking at the methods, but what I have cited, in fact it is a kind of a series. Yes, the simplest one, the simplest method which is available to us involves use of the list of impacts, just basically listing the impacts to ensure that none has been forgotten. None has been silent. That is the simplest one we have it, checklist for example. The most complex method that we have with us, it includes the use of interactive computer programs and networks, models, and that includes even the energy flows schemes, so that you will be coming to know that it's very complex. Rather, the output is also very complex, but nevertheless it gives a lot of productive results. So in a way, the methods will have the simplest one to the complex one, and it is a very, very important thing. And time and again I am mentioning these methods are basically useful for identifying the impacts. Yes, it is useful for identifying the impacts, but nevertheless it has been used for other aspects also. Other aspects means, I mean to say, the impact prediction, impact evaluation, communication of the impacts as well, and mitigation, and finally whatever we are doing, it has to be presented in a proper possibly understandable manner and with a definite clarity, brevity, and these all will be basically possible using this method. So in a way, this methods what we are discussing, it is not only for impact identification, it is used for different processes, that is different steps that is involved in EIA process. For that also these methods can be utilized. Okay. Next one is, let us see the checklist. The first and foremost the method we will be discussing today is the checklist. Checklist, you can understand by the word itself, it is basically useful for identifying the key impacts. I said key important impacts, it can be used, it can be identified, and thereafter, and it is also, the basic purpose is that none of the impact should be silent or should not be left out. So that is the basic purpose of this checklist. And this checklist, the methodology is used normally in the scoping exercise. And if you look at the demand of the checklist, the methods, it includes information such as data, study options, the questions to be answered. There are different methods are there. Questionnaire checklist is there, and statutory thresholds. These are all the basic requirements for going forward with the checklist method. And this particularly one limitation of the checklist is that it is generally not suitable for detailed analysis, but nevertheless it is simple but effective. So most of the checklists are based on a list of factors, and it can be, as I said, it can be a biophysical factor, social factor, economic factors, and these are the factors. If you see, they are going to be definitely impacted by the development process, and also these factors will be the most important factors that we need to take into account, because when you understand that how the project proposal or any kind of developmental project, it can have an impact on the environment, these factors has to be taken into account. So in a way, the checklist take into account all the possible factors, the biophysical factors, social factors and economic factors. So this is basic about the checklist. And these checklists, what is the purpose of it? It is basically, it is used to identify the impacts, and definitely this most important thing is that, as I told you, that the impacts cannot be sidelined, it should not be left out. That is a basic thing, but very important thing, this checklist does not include the direct cause effect links. So that is again a limitation of this checklist. Nevertheless, it is very easy to use. And a lot of types are there. The most important type is the questionnaire checklist. And these questionnaire checklists are based on a set of questions to be answered, and as simple as that, because certain questions will be asked to the definitely the interview as part of the structure, the collection of the information. It will be asked to decipher what kind of impact the project proposal can have on the community, what kind of impact it can have on the environment. So this is basically the questionnaire checklist, and the questions basically it concerns with the indirect impacts and also possibly the mitigation measures also, because as part of the questionnaire methods, the question can also include the mitigation options, kind of an adaptation, the kind of an alternative. So that also will be deciphered through this questionnaire checklist method. And also it provides, if you see in the question, if you see it, it provides a scale, a kind of a scale for classifying the estimated impacts from highly adverse to the highly beneficial. A scale is provided, so that can help us to understand much better the impacts of the project. Okay. For example, the questionnaire method, the checklist can include a question like that, whether the project proposal will have an impact on the land and water in terms of contamination, in terms of pollutant release, and what kind of impact it can have on the surface water body or underground water body. It is a simple question. So, and when you look at this kind of question, it will be posed, and the responses will be yes or no, and definitely the remarks will be there. So that also will be very much factored into this kind of a methodology. And when you see, this is a very straightforward question, and from this question subdivisions can be there. Okay, whether the the impact or the kind of land contamination or water contamination it has come through which stage of the proposal, or which stage of, for example, whether during the handling stage or a storage stage or handling of any kind of materials, hazardous materials kind of things. So which stage is important. So that can also be we can definitely decipher through this particular methodology. And what kind of impact this discharge of the sewage or effluent can have on the land, also that definitely that can be also deciphered, that can be definitely taken into account. The next one is the threshold of a concern, the threshold of concern checklist. It's another type of checklist. Basically, this kind of checklist include a list of environmental components. List of environmental components can be the surface water quality, the air quality, and it can be even the endangered species, what you call the bird population. So these all will be part of the environmental component, and for each and every component, the environmental component, a threshold at which those assessing a proposal should become concerned with an impact. So for each and every component there will be a threshold. Okay. For example, the air quality, we will have air standards. Water quality, we have water standards. And for example, if you have we wanted to deal with the economic aspect of the proposal, we will be talking about the benefit cost ratio. So that is how beneficial the project is. So that also has to be taken. It's a kind of a threshold. And when you are examining the proposals, we have to look at the environmental component as well as the threshold, and if it is overshooting the threshold, definitely it is a cause of concern. So we will be examining those things, and we will be trying to find out that how many times, the number of times that an alternative exceeds the threshold of concern. Okay. So based on that thing, we will be examining that particular alternative, whether it is beneficial or not, whether it is not beneficial. So based on that thing, we will be selecting that alternative which is having a minimum number of thresholds. We will be selecting those alternatives. So this is basically about the threshold of concern checklist. So now let us go into the second method. This is basically the matrices method, a kind of extension of it. Yes, it is a kind of an extension of the idea, the checklist idea, but nevertheless it will have certain positive points when you compare with the checklist. Basically, the matrices are used for impact identification, but also they provide facility to the cause and effect links also definitely explicitly measured through using this matrices method, because in the previous one it was not there, but in this case the cause effect links between the impact sources and also the impacts, that also can be measured through this method, matrices. So when I say the impact sources and impacts, definitely we can measure. So what it means that we will have a kind of a graph wherein on one axis we will have impact sources, the other axis will be having the impacts. So that is how a kind of a matrix will be there. And we see this matrices can also indicate certain features of the impact, such as the predicted magnitudes and also the importance, how localized it is, and how whether the impacts is short term or long term. That is one of the objective of our methods. This is also very well factored using this matrices method. Okay. And this is perhaps the most common impact assessment methodologies will be having it. The simplest one is the simple matrices. When you talk about the simple matrices, basically they are the two-dimensional charts showing the environmental component on one axis, the other one is the development action on the other one. As I told you, that it's basically a two-dimensional one. It is basically a kind of an improvement, a kind of an expansion of checklist that acknowledge the fact that various components of the development project, that whether it is a construction activity or a operational activity, decommissioning, every aspect of the development project will be factored in, and it will be very well placed in that particular axis, and definitely each and every component, component of the project will have its own impacts. Okay. So this is basically the simple matrix. It is basically a two-dimensional one. So the action for that can happen for each and every component is being placed, will be identified, and in that particular cell, if you see, if it is a matrix, definitely it will have a cell, and each and every cell talks about what it reflects about the interaction between the environmental component and the impact. So each and every cell talks about it. It reflects about the the kind of interaction that is between the impact sources and the impact. Okay. If it is having a probable effect, definitely you will be placing a cross mark. So this is basically about the matrices. And as far as the types of matrices, there are different types of just now we are discussing about the simple one, which is 2-dimensional one. There are 3-dimensional matrices also. It has been developed in such a way that the third dimension refers to the economic and social institutions, and such an approach identifies the institutions from which data are needed for the EIA process. So in this 3-dimensional matrices, along with the impact sources and impacts, we have the economic and social institutions also. This is about the 3-dimensional matrices. There is next one is the time dependent matrix, which it's a fascinating one because it includes the time scale of the impacts also. The timeline we will be finding it. So whether it is for example, each and every year what kind of impact it will be there, and that is the kind of modification and kind of definitely the better than the previous ones. This is about the time dependent matrix. The next one is the magnitude matrices. When you talk about magnitude matrices, again it is beyond the mere identification of impacts. It describes about the magnitude and impact, importance and also the time frame. So everything has been included in this magnitude matrices, and each and every aspect. For example, if it is a negative impact, we can have a symbol, small one, and based on the dimensions, I mean to say, positive impact, we can have our own identification marks. And these are all the basic things about the magnitude matrices. The last one is the Lavalier matrix. It is in fact the best available matrix as far as the type of a quantified matrix is concerned. The basic purpose of this matrix is the identification of impacts, as I told you, and also the determination of their magnitude and importance. That is the most important thing, because we need to determine the magnitude and importance. The next one is the project actions. If you look at it, it has been related to the environmental components, and as I said, each and every cell in a matrix that will be reflecting the interaction. Okay, the interaction between the environmental component and also the project action. Okay, so in this case, if you look at this Lavalier matrix, the actions are ranged. Whatever the actions, project action, it has been ranged in the horizontally, wherein the columns signifies it. And as far as the components is concerned, environmental component is concerned, it has been listed in the vertical direction. It's the columns and rows. So this is basically about this Lavalier matrix. Now, what it signifies, each and every cell signifies the interaction component, and the cell also it been bisected into two parts. When I say bisected into two parts, so one part of the cell will be describing the magnitude, the other one will be talking about the importance of the particular project. So if you look at that particular thing, for example, the score for the magnitude is placed in the top left hand corner of each cell. On the other hand, the score for importance is placed in the bottom right hand corner. So this is about the Lavalier matrix. And in this session, interestingly, we have seen what are the basic goals of the environmental impact assessment methodologies and the basic goals, and based on that thing, if you look at that the methods, irrespective, it's not only used for the identification of the impacts, it is also useful for every stage of the environmental impact, the process, the evaluation stage, even in the last stage also it has been definitely used. So in this session we have seen the two important methods, one is the checklist method and the other one is the matrices method.